every neighbourhood, on every street, there is that one person who just doesn't fit in with the rest. Sometimes they are an elusive recluse that rarely ventures much further than the mailbox. Sometimes they're a grumpy senior citizen who seems to hate all things fun. On my street, that person is Mr. Thomas. He is an elderly man who is always found either in his home or sitting on his back porch. He detests people even stepping a foot on his property and has been known to threaten civil action against those who antagonize him. If you ever had the police show up on a noise complaint, you can bet Mr. Thomas made that call. If your ball or frisbee went over his fence, you might as well kiss it goodbye, because you were never getting it back. This caused all the children of our street to fear and despise him. He was the grumpy boogeyman of Wilson Street. It is sad, really, because us older children remember a time when none of that was the case. When I was a boy, Mr. Thomas was the sweet old man from down the street. Whenever you walked by, he was always there on the front porch with a smile on his face, ready with a friendly wave and a pleasant hello. Mrs. Thomas would always have treats on hand, and nothing could beat her homemade gingerbread cookies. When it came to Halloween and Christmas, no one went more all out than the Thomas house. They were the shining jewels of the neighbourhood and beloved by all. That was until 6 years ago, when everything changed. It was a pleasant 4th of July evening. Everyone was coming back from fireworks. We could hear a series of loud cries coming from the Thomas house. My parents and I rushed over to find Mr. Thomas sitting on his back porch with his face covered in tears. My parents asked what was wrong multiple times, and he just kept repeating the words, "She's gone, she's gone." It didn't take them long to know who he is talking about, and they rushed in expecting to find Mrs. Thomas on the floor, having suffered a heart attack or a stroke or something. However, multiple searches of the house turned up empty. They asked him again and again where she was, only to receive the same answer: gone. The police turned up and took over the questioning from there. However, they received no better answers than my parents had. After days of questioning and investigating, the police were forced to let him go, having found no evidence of foul play. The neighbourhood was abustle with rumours and theories about what exactly had happened to Mrs. Thomas. The most rational one was that their marriage had been struggling for years, until finally she snapped and abandoned him. The other theory that became popular among the children was that he had murdered his wife and buried her body in the woods. I didn't know what theory to believe. All I cared about was that the pleasant couple from down the street was truly gone forever. My parents said that it was just grieving, but Mr. Thomas was never the same after that night. He became a hermit, not wanting to be seen by the public. His favourite chair on the porch became forever vacant, and his garden withered from neglect. When October came, you would not find so much as a rubber bat as a decoration on his door. The Thomas Christmas party that was once a treasured tradition was now little more than a memory. It would seem that Mr. Thomas's love of holidays had vanished along with his wife. However, The holiday he hated the most was, of course, the 4th of July. If he even heard so much as a firecracker, he would send a call to the police station. For several years, he sent out a petition to ban all fireworks displays in town. Of course, those petitions never saw more than his solitary signature lining its pages. So eventually he just stopped trying altogether. That was when the wind chimes started. Practically overnight, he seemed to become an avid collector of every wind chime on the market. At first, it seemed promising that perhaps picking up a hobby was the old Mr. Thomas coming back. This was, however, not the case, as his smile never returned. He placed wind chimes on every one of his doors and windows. Some people thought that this was his way of getting revenge for the fireworks, as when the wind blew, even a big banger seemed quiet compared to the clangs coming from his house. A few people debated on making a petition of their own, but in the end, no one had the heart to do it. Whether from fear or pity, everyone wanted to leave the old man alone. All that changed this 4th of July. My parents found a movie in my room with X as the rating instead of PG-13, and as such, I was forbidden to attend the fireworks display. I sat in my room, blankly staring at the television, when the strangest thought went through my brain. This must be how Mr. Thomas feels all the time. I grew sad, remembering the man who once was. Today would be the hardest and loneliest day of the year for the old man. I could just picture him, sitting all alone in his empty living room, and I felt a great sense of pity for him. Then, an idea that would make my younger peers faint entered my mind. I wanted to go and try to comfort him. My parents barred me from attending the show, but that didn't mean I had to remain in the house. I simply shrugged, then made up my mind to go and at least try to visit him. The streets were unnervingly dark and quiet. With everyone down at the park, the neighbourhood felt more like a ghost town. That thought sent a strange chill down my back, and I quickened my pace. Mr. Thomas's house was the only one on the street with any lights turned on, and I knew he was home, as if I had any doubt to begin with. I walked slowly up his driveway, and I knocked gently on his door. I thought he might storm out with a scowl on his face and a shotgun in his hand. However, something even stranger happened. The door slowly swung open at my gentle knock. The idea of his door being unlocked was surprising enough, but to be left open was a complete anomaly. "Mr. Thomas?" I asked, poking my head through the door. This was the first time I had entered their house since Mrs. Thomas's birthday party over 6 years ago, and at first glance, it seemed like it hadn't changed a bit. Their fall coats still hung waiting for their chance to be used again, and no one ever would. The house was completely quiet, and I considered leaving. But with the door left open, I became worried about Mr. Thomas's safety. I tiptoed through his foyer. "Mr. Thomas, are you here? It's Jimmy from down the street. I was just checking to see if you're okay," I called out into the darkness. no sound met my call. I stepped into the living room, and I was unnerved by what I saw. I was completely surrounded by images of Mrs. Thomas. Every inch of mantel and table space was covered with framed pictures of her smiling face. I felt sadness well up inside me, for it had been years since I'd seen her face, and I'd almost forgotten how radiant her smile was. But I was then filled with a different feeling altogether. Confusion. This was not the living room of a man who murdered his wife, nor was it one that was abandoned by her. Whatever happened to Mrs. Thomas, her husband loved and missed her terribly. I turned towards the dining room, and I was instantly assaulted by a very different series of images. Covering all the walls were drawings and paintings that I could not quite make out. Some of them were splashes of colour in a spiral, others of tall black figures with no discernible features. The images that unnerved me the most were a pair of black and purple orbs. It seemed to be that Mr. Thomas had drawn these the most. They ranged in quality, with some looking like they were drawn with shaking hands, and others looking like a master painter had done them. These orbs seemed to drill right into me, and I became uncomfortable in their presence. The drawings were so erratically placed on every inch of wall that they radiated with a single word: madness. I considered leaving then and there, but that was when I spotted the door. Laying on the hardwood floor was the door leading to the basement. It had been ripped cleanly off its hinges from the outside. I went over and I tried to lift it, only to discover that this door was made of solid steel. This was the type of entryway that you might find on a bomb shelter. It possessed every type of lock known to man, and yet someone, or something, had torn it off as if it were plastic. I felt a fear like I had never known take hold of me, and it was taking all my will not to run away screaming. Leading away from the basement was a trail of scratch marks, heading towards the back door. It looked as if someone was dragged across the floor, fighting the whole way. A voice in my head was screaming for me to run, to go home and call the cops. But what if Mr. Thomas needed help now? I couldn't abandon the old man when it seemed like his life was in danger. Against all logic, I followed the trail of scratches leading to the back porch. The backyard showed even more signs of a struggle. The balcony rods were missing chunks of wood, as if someone grabbed on with all their might. In the lawn, several patches of grass were pulled out by the root. I could see a clear imprint of a body being dragged right into the woods, and it looked very fresh. Every primal instinct screamed at me, but I could not let them control me. So I ran straight into that field of trees. I stepped quickly and carefully through the foliage of the forest. I didn't know who was taking Mr. Thomas, but I knew that I could not let them hear me, no matter what. The forest seemed far too quiet for a calm summer night. There were no little critters scurrying around, no owls looking for prey. They had all been smart enough to hide from the forest invaders. The moon shone overhead, sending long shadows through the trees. I could feel my childhood fear of those shadows creeping up like a spider, and I began to shake. Looking back, it seemed to be so foolish to be afraid, for I was about to find out that there were things so much worse than shadows and trees. The trail ended in a small clearing, and there I could see Mr. Thomas kneeling in the dirt. I was about to call out to him, but that was when I noticed he was sobbing. I felt as if I had gone back in time, for those were the same sobs we had all heard exactly 6 years prior. He looked up into the dark trees on the other side of the clearing and began to beg. "Please, just give her back. I don't care what happens to me. Just give her back, you bastards." I thought for a moment that he might be suffering from some delusion, for we were alone out here. But that was when I saw them, and I had to stifle a scream. At the other end of the clearing was what I initially mistook for shadowy trees, but they were actually figures. They were pitch black and impossibly long. Their bodies were completely disproportionate, with legs that were far too thick and arms that were far too thin. They had to stand at least 7 feet tall, and they had these elongated skulls. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see no mouth nor nose on their faces. They seemed to be covered in a layer of thick ooze. That was when I got a whiff of their scent, and I almost gagged. Their odor was beyond horrible and completely indescribable. There was nothing on this earth that matched their scent. It was at that moment that the thought occurred to me that these figures were just that, not of this earth. That thought had me gasping audibly before I could even control myself, and at that moment, all of the figures' heads snapped toward me at once, and I could see their eyes for the first time. My blood turned cold in my veins as I stared into those eyes, and in an instant, I understood what those orbs in the drawings were. Their eyes were as black as their skin, and yet held a strange violet sheen to them. These were eyes that had seen countless worlds and galaxies. Eyes that held the secrets of the universe. And now, they were focused on me. A strange and nearly skeletal hand arose from the darkness. The hand bore only 3 fingers, and each tipped with a bulbous, frog-like pad. 2 of the fingers curled, leaving just one pointed directly at me. Mr. Thomas turned around and noticed me for the first time. His eyes held fear at first. Then, his eyes turned to a look of pure guilt and sorrow. A single tear fell from his left eye, and I knew that he was actually apologizing to me. As if summoned by some invisible force, Mr. Thomas was pulled into the forest so quickly that A scream didn't even have time to rise from his throat. The black figures seemed to dissolve into shadows, as if they were never there. For a second, all was quiet, and then came a mighty blast of wind. It sent every wind chime on the house shrieking into a crescendo of deafening music. I was forced to cover my ears to try and muffle the sound in vain. I looked up just in time to see a spiral of blinding colour shoot off into the sky. In what could only be the result of careful planning, the colour spiral reached its peak height just as the town's fireworks began blasting into the night. The anomaly was lost in a sea of colours, and when all was finished, nothing remained in the sky but a mass of smoke. I don't know how long I stood there, simply staring into the sky. Eventually, my natural instincts kicked in, and I slowly made my way home, so my parents wouldn't know I'd left. I told them nothing when they came home. I debated on telling the authorities about what I saw, but would they believe such an impossible tale from a boy of barely 13? I thought not. No more than they would believe an old man whose wife had just disappeared. I simply kept my mouth shut and let nature take its course. It took the authorities 8 days to discover that Mr. Thomas was gone. And even then, it was only because the mailman noticed that the mailbox hadn't been emptied. The police were as clueless to his disappearance as they were with his wife. In the end, most people believed that he just left town and took his own life. Mr. Thomas, the so-called boogeyman of Wilson Street, was gone. He leaves behind no family and no next of kin. He only had 2 true pieces of inheritance, of which I am the sole benefactor. These are madness and the solitary knowledge that these things will be back.